Hello, Bill Molyneux here with Bill's History and Wargame World. I'm at the Maryland Veterans Memorial Museum, and take it away.
Hi, welcome to the museum. My name is Connie Uwe. I am an ambassador here at the museum. Our exhibits are open on Saturdays and Sundays from 11 a.m. to 4 p.m. As recently, our outdoor exhibits are open 24/7. Our gate is now open. We can enjoy our outdoor exhibits of vehicles and the memorial garden for the,
Keep going, you're doing great.
And you can enjoy our memorial garden by the Daughters of the American Revolution, a never forget garden in honor of the 100th anniversary of the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier on our grounds.
Well, thank you very much, and we're going to walk around and do a video. This is my second time here. I loved it when I was here in November, and you have more new things I see have been added to your exhibits. So we're going to walk around, and when we leave, we're going to chit-chat with you and say thank you, and we might have a couple questions for you.
Great, fantastic. Welcome back.
Thank you.
You're very welcome. This is one of our kiosks. This is a touch screen. And this gives anybody, especially children who love to put their hands on things, anybody can use it. We have a little guide for the history buffs of each conflict where we have a gallery. And as you can see with the touch screen, you can make it bigger, you can make it smaller. And these, on the table of contents, these are all anchor links. So for example, if you want to learn more about the evacuation of Saigon, you can just click it and it takes you right to a story.
That is pretty cool.
Now if you, a quick way to get back to the table of contents, because not everybody is going to have time to stand here and read the entire thing in one visit. So you can go back over here and hit the button that says Vietnam, and it takes you right back to the beginning, and you can pull back up and get the go back to the table of contents. Another interesting feature is we have videos on the left-hand side. For example, here's one that says riverboats. You touch it. Please work, please work. There we go.
There we go.
And you can watch videos.
Wow.
And learn more about the conflict with in conjunction with the artifacts.
Also based in our bay are units of one of the Navy's newest craft, the River Patrol Boat, or PBR. The PBR, developed from an existing civilian pleasure craft, has been redesigned and equipped for use in...
In fact, we are having a Taste of Southern Maryland event in April. It is a benefit for us. Some local businesses have come together to organize it, where we will have a stage with live music. We will have local food vendors, beverage vendors, artisans, other sales type vendors.
And what's the date of that?
That is April 23rd with the rain date of April 30th. Tickets are $10. They can be purchased on Eventbrite ahead of time, or you can purchase them at the gate. Children 12 and under are free, and the ticket proceeds benefit the museum.
All right. Well, we are at Gigi, the Gatling Gun. We got Goober, the traveling bear. And can you tell us a little bit about this Gatling gun?
Well, the Gatling gun is on loan here at the museum, and it takes up good space. It's gorgeous. People love to visit her. Goober is very excited to meet Gigi, as we can see. He's got a nice little smile on his face. And we're happy to present it for the limited time that we have it.
Well, thank you very much, and thank you for letting Goober check out the Gatling gun.
You're very welcome. We are here at the Middle East Gallery, and we have a display in honor of Petty Officer Romeo. He was an immigrant. However, he grew up here in Charles County and went to high school in Waldorf. And he had the unfortunate to be at the Pentagon on 9/11. And unfortunately, he lost his life there when the airplane crashed. We have one of his uniforms here and a little story about him and who he was. And I read online a anecdote where on that day before the plane crashed, he was on the phone to his mother, and his sister had packed his lunch that morning, and he saw a note that she left in it. And he was very touched that his sister left a note in his lunch, and about 30 minutes later was when the plane came down.
Wow. Very nice memorial you have to him to keep his memory alive.
Absolutely. Okay.
So there's so much to see here. I don't have enough memory in my camera, but we're going to do another snippet of each room, and hopefully it'll entice you to come and visit this wonderful museum.
All right. Okay, we are now in the Vietnam Gallery, and our Vietnam Gallery is dedicated to Master Chief Petty Officer Bonnie Kaufman. Bonnie Kaufman was an air traffic control officer during Vietnam. And when I give tours, I mention that when most people think about women serving in Vietnam, they think of nurses. And though there were many women who were nurses in Vietnam, nursing was not the only profession a woman could do in that era, as proven by Bonnie as being an air traffic control officer. Or not an officer, she's air traffic controlman. She was enlisted, not an officer, so.
Okay. All right. What
Sorry
else do we
about that.
have that's very unique? I mean, you have some wonderful display items
Yes. Aside from an actual booby trap and a story of the booby trap, this is actually my favorite. This is in honor of the Vietnam Wall, and it tells a story. And the story that it tells is you see a veteran who has obviously lost a leg. He's visiting the Vietnam Wall. And as you and I would go to the Vietnam Wall and see the names of the fallen on the wall, this veteran, he sees the faces of the people that he knew whose names are on that wall. So as we are only looking at names engraved in granite, he's seeing the people.
That is an incredible
I love
display.
It. This
Yes.
is my favorite. And of course you see a member of Rolling Thunder who's also a veteran, and he is at the wall and he is offering a salute.
Very nice. Very nice. All right. Where would we like to go next?
Okay, we can head on over to Korea. We are in the Honor Hall to honor all women veterans. This entire wing and the hallway is dedicated to the service of women from the beginning up to the Revolutionary War all the way to present day.
Wow. And it's just, I could spend all my memory on my phone camera just going through all of these. This is a must-see museum, and it's in a timeline all the way through. Very nice.
Yes. Hello again. We are at the Korea Gallery. And right here, I tell the children that this was the iPhone of the day, and they get a really big kick out of it. This is a real ejector seat. And we always tell people that when the pilots would have to eject, they would need to keep their back straight, or otherwise they will break their back.
Wow. There's a Sabre jet. There is so much to see in this museum. What is that big camera, ma'am?
This is an aerial camera, and the kids really get a kick out of it because they have never in their lives seen a camera this big before. Because you have a camera is in your phone that's probably more powerful than this one. But this aerial camera would be a camera that would be affixed to an airplane, as so photographs would be taken while in the air.
Very neat.
Yes. One summer, a visitor came up to me and said, "Somebody put trash in one of your exhibits." I said, "Really? Come show me." So we come over here, and he points to the Tootsie Roll wrapper in the display. Well, I explained to the gentleman that that was not trash. We did that on purpose, and we have the true story. Since then, we put a sign telling the true story of the Tootsie Rolls. It's a very interesting story where over in the Chosin Reservoir, the Marines there were freezing, they had no food, and they needed to have some more ammo delivered to them. Well, the code name for the particular 50-60 caliber bullet was nicknamed the Tootsie Roll. So they call in for supply delivery and ask for so many thousand Tootsie Rolls. Well, the person doing dispatch that day was new, did not know the code, and sent them literal Tootsie Rolls. So the Marines received the candy instead of the ammunition, but it ended up being a really good thing for them. And that is because the candy gave up their morale, it gave them something to eat. The texture of the Tootsie Rolls, they could be warmed up and put into plugging holes in ammo cans and refreeze. And it was something that, it ended up being a really good thing. It had an advantage. So the
Very
frozen
good.
chosen and the
Well,
Tootsie
I
Roll.
learned something about the Korean War and the Tootsie Roll.
Absolutely.
All right, I'm going to pause the camera.
This is my personal favorite item in the Korea Gallery, is the model of the MASH unit. The model was made by an Eagle Scout for his Eagle Scout project. And we have his name and troop number engraved on a plaque.
I'll come down to that. My son is an Eagle Scout, so we have to, let me make sure I got that good to give
Yes.
him the proper credit he deserves.
Yes,
There we go.
This is an awesome, he has the detail all the way down to the photograph picture on the desk.
Oh, yeah.
Isn't that great?
I have a little glare, but we're working around it. Of course, my videos are a little rough, but at least I try. This is an incredible little diorama. All right.
All right. And my husband. All right. This is one of my husband's favorite photographs of the Korea conflict. When he was a child, he was attracted to that photo, and something
This
made
one
him.
here?
Yes, this one right here. There was something about this gentleman right here in this photograph that intrigued him. So he did some research on it, and he learned that this is First Lieutenant Valdemoro Lopez, and he was actually killed just minutes after this photograph was taken.
Wow.
And what we learned about Lieutenant Lopez is that he was first in World War II. He was in the Navy, and when he came back from World War II, he went to the Naval Academy and served a Marine Corps commission. And then he goes off to Korea. Now, what happened here is that he's in front of his men leading, and he is getting ready to throw a grenade. And as he has his arm up going to throw the grenade, he is shot. And the grenade is live and drops. So he sacrifices himself by jumping on the grenade and saving his men behind him.
What a story.
Yes. We're in the World War II gallery, and we have a monument to the Army Nurse Corps. And we have a story of a lady from Charles County. Her name was Rosemary. And back in these days, she wanted to be a flight attendant. And pre-World War II, the airlines only hired nurses to serve as flight attendants. So Rosemary went to become a nurse. So she is later recruited into the Army Nurse Corps and ends up becoming a flight nurse.
Wow, very cool. When I was here last time, that display painting, who did that? That is just beautiful.
That is a photograph, and I'm sorry to say I do not know the actual artist or the photographer, but I'm glad that you mentioned it because this gallery is dedicated to the memory of Andrew Lawrence. He was a Charles County native, And he was driving a tank during the Battle of the Bulge, and he was injured and taken prisoner by the Germans. And he ended up losing his legs, but being rescued and brought home. And he came back to Charles County, came back to farming, and lived to the age of 99.
Wow. Yeah, that's a really cool mural you have here.
Yes, this shows the Battle of the Bulge and what environment Andrew Lawrence was in when he was injured as the tank driver and taken prisoner.
That three-dimensional belt of ammunition to the machine gun is so cool.
Yes, absolutely.
And when you do come visit the museum, there are things everywhere, including the ceiling. And I'll pause the camera here and take me to your next spot.
We have a diorama of the Battle of Tarawa. It was a very interesting story. At Tarawa, the Marines are fighting and the high tide comes in. And as the high tide comes in, many Marines drowned. And this was actually the event that got the U.S. Navy to decide, I think we need some underwater combat training. So that was when the Navy Frogmen and the UDTs were developed. So now we could train people to actually fight in water like this. And they were the precursor to today's Navy SEALs. So if it weren't for a battle or incidents at the Battle of Tarawa, we may not have Navy SEALs today.
Very, very cool. All right. And I could spend I could spend hours in this museum. This is a must-see place. And we're going to the next room.
Many people of Charles County residents never knew that Charles County once had a POW camp during World War II. This was in the area of Nanjemoy, and we have a painting here that was done by one of the prisoners. In fact, a local resident who brought us the story was a child where his father owned a machine shop. And the POWs in Nanjemoy, if they weren't working on somebody else's farm, or they were working in this man's machine shop. So some of the German POWs would actually sit at the dinner table with the family. And the young man would go out as a child. He'd play soccer with some of the prisoners, got to know them, and after the war, they became pen pals.
Wow. All right. Where are we heading to next?
Okay, let's go to World War I.
We're heading to World War I, everyone.
Here in the World War I gallery, we have some very interesting artifacts. For example, we have authentic World War I posters that have survived for over 100 years. They were given to somebody, and the lady who donated them to us got them from her mother-in-law. Her mother-in-law kept them in her kitchen for decades, and that is how they had been preserved and not thrown away. And the fact that they look the way they do for being over 100 years old is amazing.
Wow, very neat.
From the United States Food Administration, and she kept them in the kitchen. It's almost like you better clean your plate. There were people starving in World War I.
All right. And in this room, there's all kinds of neat historical artifacts. And I don't have enough video memory to show everyone everything in this museum. You have to come here yourself.
We're here in another hallway at the other side of the Maryland Veterans Museum. And near our Buffalo Soldier display, we have a mannequin dressed in a replica of a chaplain's uniform of a Buffalo Soldier, next to some exquisite art.
Very nice. And the last time I was here, the mural of the Buffalo Soldiers is just incredible. It's some of the artwork you have in this museum is really neat. It's life size.
Right. We actually take photographs and had them enlarged by a local printing company.
That's really neat.
And we tell the story of Kathy Williams. You got to come here to read her story.
All right.
We have a few items here from the Spanish-American War. We have a photograph of Teddy Roosevelt and his Rough Riders. And we have a tunic from the era that, it was a band tunic from the era.
Okay.
We're here in the Revolutionary War Gallery, one of my personal favorite galleries. And over here we have another Eagle Scout project. This is a diorama of the Battle of Brooklyn. This is where the Maryland 400 saves George Washington and the American Revolution. This is over in Brooklyn. You have the redcoats, the British over here. The men in the brown are the Maryland with the Calvert banner. And the gentlemen over here in the blue are Hessians. Hessians were German mercenaries paid for by the crown to fight for the British. So on this day, the Maryland 400 comes in to give cover for George Washington and his men as they escape New York. And when George Washington was told that the Maryland 400 had came in to cover him, he was quoted as saying, "Good God, what brave souls I lose today." Or where was it? Oh, let me repeat that. George Washington is quoted as saying, "Good God, what brave fellows I must lose, or this day lose." So
Wow.
He knew the Maryland 400 gave up their lives to save him and the American Revolution.
And Robert Ambrose at Fort Frederick. I think you'll like that flag. Same one we fly, for the most part, back at Fort Frederick.
We're here at the Women of the American Revolution display. This one is sponsored by the Port Tobacco chapter, Daughters of the American Revolution. We have a spinning wheel and stories of different women who participated in the American Revolution. And one of my personal favorites is a woman, Margaret Cochran Corbin. Now, actually, this painting does not specifically talk about Mrs. Corbin, but she had done something very, very similar. And Mrs. Corbin is the only woman who was on record by paperwork and supporting documentation to say, yes, this woman did what she did. But what happened was, during the early days of America, when there were wars, women were camp followers. These women served as cooks, nurses, men. They were out of harm's way, but they were nearby. And Mrs. Corbin was there with her husband at the Battle of Fort Washington in New York. Her husband worked the cannon. Her husband was shot and killed in front of her while she was near the camp. And for some reason, she knew exactly what to do, as she just joined right in the battle and just started working the cannon. Eventually in the battle, she would be shot in the shoulder and taken prisoner. Eventually, she would be freed in a prisoner exchange, but her wounds never healed. She never regained use of her arm, so she had people, there were documents on record of the brass saying, hey, this woman was injured in this battle and now she can't work, she can't move her arm, she's going to need some assistance. So in all intents and purposes in reality, you could say that not only was Margaret Cochran Corbin the very first American woman to serve in combat, she was also the very first American woman disabled veteran.
Wow.
Very few people know that.
All right.
All righty. During the Rochambeau Trail, as Rochambeau comes from France to help George Washington in the Revolutionary War, they come down on their way to Yorktown. Two of Rochambeau's men visited Charles County, Maryland, and we have the documents on record to prove it. And this painting was commissioned to depict the visit of Rochambeau's troops in Port Tobacco.
Very cool. And from where I live in Nottingham, Maryland, where our post office is, we have a roadside marker that shows where Rochambeau and his French troops spent 2 nights on their march to Yorktown.
Absolutely. But there was also the Rhode Island Regiment, 1st Rhode Island Regiment. They were mainly free and formerly enslaved African Americans. They served in multiple campaigns that are listed here on our display.
Very nice. I'm learning so much today, and I really need to say thank you for taking the time to take me around your museum. All right, well, what room are we in now?
We are in the 1812 gallery, and this is the USS Constitution, the very first American frigate to defeat another frigate in battle.
Wow, and the work you all did to make this is just phenomenal. And may I ask, why do we have some oranges on the deck of the ship?
Because oranges contain vitamin C, and this era, if you're on ship and you have a vitamin C deficiency, you're liable to get scurvy. So the oranges were for them to supplement their bodies with vitamin C to help prevent scurvy.
That is such a nice touch that you added that.
Absolutely. We had young men on board that they used to call powder monkeys. They're about roughly 9-year-old boys. The reason they were used was because they were very small and they could get very quickly through small spaces on board the ship to help bring water and powder to help the cannon, for the use of the cannons. Another very interesting story about the United States Constitution that we cannot leave here without mentioning is that the USS Constitution has never been decommissioned by the U.S. Navy. It is still in existence today. She is docked in Boston. The CEO, the current CEO, is the very first woman to CO the USS Constitution. She goes out to sea briefly to turn her around from the sun, and it's also a museum where people can tour and visit, and U.S. Navy personnel still receive orders to serve on board her. Another interesting tidbit that many people do not know about the USS Constitution is that in the Indiana area is a forest called Constitution Grove. What they do is they grow the exact species of white oak tree to use the wood to make repairs on her.
Wow.
They repair her with the very same species of wood to keep her historically accurate.
Thank you.
You're very welcome. We have a local story here in Charles County, and August of 1814, more British fleet has come in to Benedict at the Patuxent River, and these troops were fresh from fighting Napoleon. So they were sent, as soon as they finished fighting Napoleon, they were sent down to invade the United States. So they come in here on the Patuxent River in the town of Benedict. Now at this time, Benedict was a large town, and it was very populated. Well, when the townspeople would look over and see thousands of British ships coming ashore, what this display depicts is what happened. The townspeople literally dropped what they were doing and fled as far as they could.
Wow.
Now, legend has it that one of the families, on their way out, decided to poison a bucket of whiskey. Hopefully the British would drink it and hopefully kill them. But that's a legend.
That's a legend.
It's a legend.
All right.
The only house in Benedict from this invasion that still stands is called Maxwell Hall, and it's a historic landmark and museum today. And there's theories as to why it was the only house the British did not burn down. We think they may have took it over and used it as headquarters and held the family hostage. We're not 100% sure, but it's one of the working theories.
Okay.
No trip to the 1812 gallery is complete without visiting the birth of the Star-Spangled Banner. What happened was, another piece of Maryland history, we just talked about the British coming ashore into Benedict. Well, these were the troops who marched from Benedict through Bladensburg in the Battle of Bladensburg while they were on their way to burn Washington, D.C. After the British troops burned Washington, D.C., they had to march back to their ships in Benedict. So on their way, Upper Marlborough freed the 2 British soldiers and took Dr. Beans prisoner for having the nerve to jail their drunken and disorderly own. Well, once this happened, President Madison hired a Georgetown lawyer by the name of Francis Scott Key to go to the British and negotiate the release of Dr. Beans. So what happened is, Francis Scott, by then the British have gone back to Benedict, took their ships, moved them up to Baltimore, and they're getting ready to shoot Fort McHenry in Baltimore. So now Francis Scott Key brings a friend, John Skinner, along. They go up to this vessel. They negotiate the release of Dr. Beans with the captain. And luckily for Dr. Beans, he was a doctor. So while he was a prisoner, he is tending to the sick and the injured British sailors. So of course, okay, it's like, okay, Dr. Beans, you can go. So they get ready to go. They're on this little boat. And by now it's dark. The British are bombing Fort McHenry. So you got Dr. Beans, John Skinner, and Francis Scott Key on this little boat headed back to Baltimore watching the fireworks, the bombardment. And they couldn't see anything until the sun came up and the smoke cleared. And then they saw that the flag was still there. Francis Scott Key goes home. He writes a poem called The Defense of Fort McHenry. And legend has it that it was John Skinner who had it published, had the name changed to the Star-Spangled Banner, and come back another day for another story about how a Maryland woman made the Star-Spangled Banner our national anthem.
All right.
We're here in the Civil War Gallery, and depending on what side you were on, it could also be called the War Between the States, but that's another story that does not belong here. But we will move on to more Maryland history. Lots of history.
We love Maryland history.
Lots of history in Maryland. This was the first time blood was shed in anger in the Civil War. And here's what happened. After Fort Sumter, the incident, President Lincoln decides he needs troops to protect Washington, D.C. So what happens is the Massachusetts Regiment is going down to D.C. But if you know about anything about travel at the time, they had to travel by railroad. And what happened is when you're traveling south, you had to stop in Baltimore, get off the train, walk several blocks, and get on another train from another part of town. I guess that's so you can make travelers buy things from the local merchants. Got to make some money, right? So anyway, as the Massachusetts soldiers are getting off the first train on their way to the second train, they are confronted by a violent mob of Confederate sympathizers who do not take too kindly Yankee troops in their state. So, of course, in pure Baltimore fashion, there is a large riot, and people are dead on both sides. One of the Maryland civilian dead just so happened to be a friend of a traveling teacher by the name of James Ryder Randall, who was away in Louisiana teaching. And when he got word of his friend's death, he wrote a poem that was called Maryland, My Maryland, that eventually became what is now the former state song of the state of Maryland.
Very cool. All right.
Very quickly, this is something that a lot of people did not know. Did you know that we had a balloon corps during the Civil War? As a matter of fact, this is a model of what we call the very first aircraft carrier. Both sides would use hot air balloons for reconnaissance and to deliver messages. And we have a booklet. When you come to visit, you may come and browse the booklet that gives you more details about the story.
Well, thank you very much.
Right. In this display, we see different items that Southerners would use to be a substitute for coffee. During the war, the North had a naval blockade, and certain items, such as coffee, could not be delivered to the South. So they tried different ideas of trying to make their own coffee substitute. And this is where I jokingly say that this was the actual real reason the South surrendered, was because they had to have coffee.
All right.
I have another artifact here that I'm excited to share that one day will be in the 1812 gallery. Come to visit and I'll tell you the story about how I got it, but I just want to share this to you. This is a copy of an actual paper that was in the papers of Samuel Hawkins. Samuel Hawkins was Charles County CO of a unit of Charles County troops during the War of 1812. And this paper was written just several days after the British invaded Benedict in August of 1814. This is a letter written by the commander of the Port Tobacco troops, and it was written, it says, compiled in Port Tobacco, 23rd August, 1814, by order of the commander, J.T. Stoddard, aide-de-camp. And I'm trying to remember who he was aide-de-camp to. I have it written down. Come to visit me, I'll look it up for you.
All right.
But I've got to read this real quick, because you're going to love this.
Go ahead.
It reads, Citizens of Charles, the enemy are in possession of the capital of your country. The section which you inhabit is exposed to their ravages and will be visited by all the calamities of war when on the return of the enemy. To arms, let no man be found from his posts. The crisis calls for the energies of the nation, and none shall be said that the people of Charles were not among the foremost in the ranks, where national honor and personal security are at stake. Rouse, my fellow soldiers, and gird on the armor of defense. Prove to this presumptuous foe who has polluted your soil by his tread that the blood which flowed in the veins of our revolutionary fathers still circulates in those of their descendants. Hasten on to the camp and share in the glory of chastising the insolence of the invasion of our soil. You gotta love it.
All right, well, here we are. Come and visit at the Maryland Veterans Memorial Museum. And your hours again, and if someone comes, how do they see you? Because you know everything about the museum.
I'm here mostly on Sundays. Sometimes I'm here on Saturdays. It depends. The galleries are open right now on Saturdays and Sundays from 11 a.m. to 4 p.m. And the outdoor exhibits are now open all the time. So you can come walk the halls, visit the Never Forget garden on the side, visit our vehicles, our new airplane display. Come see us. Can't wait to see you.
Thank you very much, and stay safe, be kind, and be courteous, everyone out there.
A couple of years ago, the local Daughters of the American Revolution, the Port Tobacco chapter, had adopted the garden here and dedicated it as a never forget garden on the 100th anniversary of the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier. And we come by, and the chapter members will come by and keep the garden pretty for us.
Very nice, and of course it's February, so we don't have a lot of...
The roses are sleeping.
But now I see something's coming up.
Yes.
So spring is around the corner. Very nice. We're going to go check on the airplane next.
But we're very proud of being able to dedicate this garden as a never forget garden.
Thank you. Well, we have some wind out here, but I'm hoping just to get a little bit of video of the airplane they just got in. And Goober the Traveling Bear thinks it's really cool.